Today we're going to be talking about what it's really like to raise a family in New York City. The pros, the cons, and everything in between. So stick with us because we'll include some pro tips for if you're looking to move to New York City with a family and how to best survive. So there are a lot of great things about living in New York City. And that remains true even if you have a family, and there's never a lack of things to do. However, there are a few things that you should know about, especially if you're moving with a family, that aren't necessarily advertised. You're not going to hear about it in, TV shows and movies. Some of the things that you should really be aware of if you're going to be living in New York City with a family. So let's jump right into it. Let's start with the tough parts. And let's get the obvious one out of the way. Cost of living. What's that guy who was running for office like 10 years ago? Or maybe even more. Rent is too damn high? Well, guess what? The rent is still too high, and it seems to only be getting higher. So according to renthop.com, the average price in May for a 2-bedroom in New York City for 2023 is $5,105, $6,015 for a 3-bedroom, and for a 4-bedroom, $7,995. Ahem. The Element report released in January of 2023 put the average price for a 3-bedroom in Brooklyn, $6,184 a month. Good luck with that. Sidebar, we were apartment hunting for various reasons, but we stopped because, well, so another major thing is getting around. Let's start with the subway. Now, as unreliable as it can be at times, public transportation remains hands down the best way to get around New York City. The tricky thing about the subway comes particularly when you have small children and you are using a stroller. Unfortunately, the larger number of subway stations in New York City are not accessible, which you might find surprising. So either you have to plan your trip around subway stations that have elevators, or you're going to be carrying your stroller up and down an incredible number of stairs. Hands up those of us who have been there. Here's a tip. My preference when I had an infant was to use a carrier. So I'd have my little one strapped to my body, and that just made running around so much easier. Up and down stairs, great exercise, by the way. You're getting on the train, you're not trying to fight your way in too much for extra space for a stroller. When you have multiples, that gets more challenging, especially if there's a toddler involved. So toddlers, I like to have strapped in, buckled in, locked down, not able to go anywhere while we're going around on the subway, especially when it's particularly crowded. And let's face it, the safety concerns as of late have been really concerning. And that has caused us, as well as many other people, to spend a lot less time using the subway system. But there does seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel, because it was reported in January of 2023 that crime on the subway had actually dropped by 30%. You can check out those stats for yourself if you'd like, but that's what I found. That brings us to traveling by car. Now, it's not the most convenient way because obviously there's a lot of traffic. You're going to be dealing with bridges and tunnels, which means tolls. So that's an added expense on top of your, obviously gas and insurance. But there is the ever-loving challenge of parking. Oh, parking. The bane of the existence of any New Yorker with a car. If you do not have your own private parking spot, you will likely suffer at least a little bit in terms of parking your car. So I know a lot of families will go without a car, but for us, we find it absolutely essential. So we deal with this on the regular. Finding a parking spot can many times be a lot like finding, I don't know, Waldo? Never mind, where's my car? Don't even start with that. If you are a couple sharing a car, and it's just sidebar. A funny thing happens every now and then where you don't really remember exactly where you parked the car. And if your partner doesn't remember exactly where they parked the car, and they tell you where they parked the car, but the car is not actually there, then you're really playing, dude, where's my car? Finding parking can be challenging, especially if you're coming home, after like the evening rush and everybody's searching for parking. I have heard many an altercation take place right outside my own window over parking spots after 7 p.m. It's not pretty. And we haven't even talked about alternate side parking, where we have to move our cars because of street cleaning. And so in many neighborhoods, 2 times a week, half the streets aren't available to park on because there's going to be street cleaning happening during that period of time. And you have to move your car and put it somewhere else. So where do you put your car? Because there already weren't enough spots when both sides of the street were available. Okay, I'm not really harping, but these are the things that you need to be aware of. It's just important to know because it's just a headspace of knowing what you're getting into and accepting what it is that the challenges you have to work with in order to live comfortably. The other thing is playtime outside, which again is really sort of specific to families because kids need a fair amount of time outside to play. And outdoor space along with your apartment comes at a premium. If you're paying a rent where you need space for 4 or more people already, taking that extra premium for the outdoor space might have to get nixed. You really need to find yourself being intentional with your outside time. I see that as an extra challenge as homeschoolers ourselves because managing a schedule of school and work and all the regular cooking, cleaning, laundry, and then making sure that you get out to the playground daily, or at least getting out to ride or to scoot or whatever it is. So you have to be really intentional with making that time. And the same thing goes actually for kids in full-time school because, after school, you still have to get your homework done, you still have to get dinner on the table, and, you might want a little time to play in the park. Okay, so I said that was the last thing, but there's another very important point for families. Laundry. This, I think, is a very particular New York City thing because I don't see that this is such a challenge in many other large cities. I would dare to say most New York City apartments are not coming pre-installed with washer and dryers in them. And a lot of buildings are not going to have them in the basement. For a lot of New Yorkers, it is a thing that you really have to go to the laundromat. And if you have clothes for 4, 5, 6 people piling up on you in the week, getting to the laundromat at the end of the week, you have to have a cart that you're carting your laundry in and dragging it over. I mean, as I was writing down the notes, I was looking out the window and watching a mom and her 3 kids with a cart pushing their laundry, heading to the laundromat down the street. So this is a thing. Newer constructions, this is becoming less and less of a thing. Or places that are getting renovated slowly are learning to incorporate this 20th century technology into 21st century apartments. So hooray for that. But just be aware that this is not something that's necessarily going to come with your apartment. So another cheat that a lot of us do, here's a tip, getting a portable washer. Now this is something that you can hook up to your kitchen sink or to your bathroom sink. They tend to be smaller, apartment size. So, for me, I have to wash pretty much every day to make sure that I stay on top of my laundry for 6 people in this apartment size portable washer. But that beats, I think, hands down, having to truck all these clothes at the end of the week to the laundromat with my kids in tow. Something also, portable dryers, getting them either ventless or having an indoor venting kit. And another thing is that they can be found in 120 volts so that you don't have to do any electrical changes in the apartment. Now, do they take longer to dry? Absolutely. But again, I find that better than having to take up half a room, putting out a large laundry hanging dryer thing, although that is also a great option if you're just washing. Now that we've dealt with all of that, let's talk about what is great about living in New York City with a family. When we opened this video, we talked about there never being a lack of things to do, and that is absolutely true. To give the kids an enriched experience, culturally and otherwise, you don't lack resources here. And it would be foolhardy to live here and not take advantage of everything that is provided. If you're going to go through all the struggles that come along with being here, take advantage of the good stuff. Do we even need to talk about museums in New York City? And particularly for kids, the children's museums, the science museums, and of course, all the other natural history, the Met. We can go on, the Guggenheim, come on. I don't even know what to say, but I feel like I have to say it because getting the obvious out of the way. And here's a tip, something you should know about, particularly for residents, that most of the museums will have some sort of resident price or a free day. This is particularly advantageous to homeschoolers, but you can certainly work around that if your kids are in school full time. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Natural History Museum, they have pay what you can prices for residents. The Bronx Zoo, it's free on Wednesdays. So you'll often see a lot of class trips there, but also us homeschoolers are there on Wednesdays taking advantage of that fact. And another tip on that regard is that if you do want to pay for those extras when you go to some place like the Bronx Zoo, you know, the cost of taking the train around, or going to one of the additional exhibitions, or what is that? Climbing zone. I forget what it's called. I will also make a note of that. You know, that might be a good day to take the expense of doing those extra things on those days where you don't even have to pay for the entry. I also think I think it's on Thursdays that the Brooklyn Children's Museum is also pay what you can. New York Hall of Science, that's in Queens, great place to go. Friday afternoons is community day and it's free to enter. So if you want a deep dive into that, like cheap and free activities that you could do with kids in the city, let me know. Give you a nice extensive list of cheap and free activities in the city, in New York City for kids. Another wonderful thing about New York City is the diversity and just the exposure to cultures. Without ever leaving the boundaries of the 5 boroughs, you can be exposed to pretty much the entire world. And especially if you get out of Manhattan. Manhattan can be a little bit if you're just in certain areas, but especially if you're going Manhattan, if you're going above, let's say 110th Street, you're definitely going to get some cultural mixes. But, you know, if you're going out to Queens, if you're going out to Brooklyn, if you're going out to the ends of the subway lines, where you're really getting a great mix of people and ethnic diversity, you can really get serious cultural enrichment just from the neighbors and the neighborhoods and, of course, the food. Of course, there are always things about getting around New York City, which, by the way, if you want to get a great view of New York Harbor and the Statue of Liberty, a great and completely free ride is the Staten Island Ferry. If you board it, boarding it from either end, but getting into Staten Island could be expensive because you have to get across the Verrazano Bridge, which is a hefty toll. But if you're coming from Manhattan and you catch the Staten Island Ferry to Staten Island, you'll get a really beautiful view and tour. And of course, the trip back to Manhattan is also free. So I think that not many people would add this on their list because it's not something that necessarily comes to mind when you think of New York City, but I have to say it. The beach. And we spend so much time there. I cannot go through this list without saying it. Now, you know, it's not the Caribbean, it's not Mexico, it's not even the West Coast, but it's the Atlantic Ocean, and quite frankly, salt water on my body, June, July, August, September. I'm not going to complain about that. Brooklyn and Queens both have really nice beaches, and quite frankly, you'll see that because the amount of New Yorkers just splayed across, you can't even see the sand if you go on the weekend for the bodies on the beach in the summertime. So seriously, why put up with the cold and uncomfortable, harsh winters in New York City if you're not going to go to the beach in the summer? This list of pros and cons is by no means an extensive list. It's just really sort of an introduction into the challenges that you face when you're living in New York City with a family, as well as some of the great things to take advantage of. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for being with us. If you found this content helpful, please give this video a like and consider subscribing if you enjoy our content. It would really help us out a lot. Thanks again for watching. Until next.